I've been thinking a lot about race recently, and I am so fucking tired. I've been thinking a lot recently about how when I live here, when I live in Denmark, I don't have whiteness, right? This it's a vague kind of concept, right? But so let me give you some context. I am half Singaporean and I'm half Danish. In Singapore, Chinese people are the majority. Chinese people are not considered people of color in Singapore. I am Chinese. I am specifically Peranakan Chinese, which seems to be, as far as my understanding of the race riots, which is not very thorough at all, seems to be kind of the bourgeois ruling class. Not bourgeois, I'm sorry, that was a bad use of that word. It seems to be kind of like the ruling class when the race riots were happening, right? I am also half white, which means in Singapore, I'm not just white, I'm like white. I am like Übermensch because I'm not white and disconnected from Singapore, the way you look Singaporean. I am also actually Singaporean, like I was born there, right? Here though, I feel like I have existed here my whole Danish life has existed feeling specifically non-white, feeling non-Danish, separate from the culture, something opposed to it. And I've been struggling recently with this feeling of like no matter how hard I fucking try, because I don't fulfill a standard of whiteness, I will not reach the same level of success that people trying way less than me can achieve. And you don't notice it's so abstract, but it's just a feeling I have in me because, and I can only point to small instances where I'm treated just baseline different. When I was younger, I would always get stopped. I would cycle through Gågaden, which is just a walking road, right? And I would get accosted by random old ladies being like, "Yo, in Denmark, we don't cycle here." Some ladies have walked in front of my bicycle to stop me, physically stop me, as some white kid would cycle past. Recently, this happened in the form of me just walking down and there was a car driving behind me, like a Vavon, right? And there was an old man in front of me that she could see. Old white man. She didn't stop him, who was also in front of the car. She stopped me. She was like, yo, 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 and I was in my headphones on. I've experienced this so many times in that exact fucking spot. I ignored her. I just looked at her and I just went on. And I was like, fuck off, old lady. Uh, it sounds really mean, but I'm so tired of it. I've gotten so many in Denmark we speak Danish. I've gotten so many, like, so many in Denmark we do this. We do X, right? Because I was different. And that's like intersectionality, right? I don't exist only as a Chinese individual. Because here in Denmark, that's all I fucking am, apparently. I exist as a mixed race, autistic, and a bunch of other identities individual. That's not my only identity point. But often, at least in my like upbringing here, I've been reduced to that. Often my actions were viewed through that lens, right? And I'm frustrated because I don't want to appeal to whiteness, right? But I'm frustrated how support and recognition comes as a byproduct of whiteness. Attractiveness comes from the byproduct of whiteness. I mean, featureism. Someone I used to have a crush on and was good friends with legit just told me I'm attracted to very Danish features. Like, I'm not attracted to things that aren't Danish. And it's like, how is that? We can call that preferences, but how is that not racism? When I was like 13, I had a conversation with my dad, and I can't remember what led up to it, but I remember breaking down at some point, crying, telling him, I feel ashamed of my race. Because of my experiences here, I had been made to feel ashamed of my race. I counted it once, and this was in 7th grade, so around that same time. I got 10 comments a day that related to my race. People would call me Wang Wang. People would say they couldn't see if my eyes were open, right? It was a constant identity point that was forced on me because I eschewed from whiteness. My dad, right? And so it's not just cultural, it's systemic. My dad, right, coming here was a educated real estate agent. He was very high up in the hotel industry beforehand, and he was a very well paid real estate agent. When he came here, could not get a job. Got fired as a waiter, man. One person fucking complained. That's how little tolerance there is for people who don't fill the standard of whiteness. Is you're given permission to exist in the society, but one fuck up at the eyes of someone who does fulfill that standard or has an understanding of it, and you're fucking gone. You don't get the patience. The same things that are just like, oh, it's the white boys can just be like, oh, that's just them, that's just kids, that's just that boys will be boys, right? Those are fucking crimes when you're colored. I remember once in the smaller classes, there was this girl in my class. I don't know why I did this. This was that was super small. It's like 8, 9. She had been labeled fat, right? And so I had noticed a lot of people calling her that and sharing bonds with each other based on calling her that. We do this a lot with a bunch of different groups. I mean, men bond from being misogynistic, right? This was skinny people bonding over making fun of the fat person. There's always like an in-group bonding based on exclusion of this out-group, right? And then I remember, so what I was going through at this point was like very intense bullying, I would say. And this girl was actually one of the people who were nice to me or tolerated my existence. I don't remember that much because I've repressed a lot of my memories, but I remember at one point also calling her fat, which is like little kid. I mean, if it was me now, very unacceptable. I'm gonna forgive 8, 9-year-old me because I feel like I was a kid. It's shitty, but I fucked up. But the thing is, people should have corrected me, yes. And it took me a long time to reflect over this, but God, the reaction that I got after it was like a conversation with my teachers, and my teachers being like, "That's not okay." And the thing that was said was, "She had been so nice to you. Why would you say something like that?" And I don't know to what extent. They were also talking with the other boys. But it gave the messaging that messaging of like one fuck up and you're gone. It gave the messaging of, we are so patient with you. How dare you fuck up? How dare you do something wrong? How dare you do the same things that everyone else does when we've been so patient with you? You who had dared to be brown. You that had dared to be a darker skin color. It's a weird fucking take, I can recognize that. I just feel it fucking everywhere. And people can't admit it. People can't fucking admit that it's happening. It's interesting seeing how much of a difference Singapore and Denmark have in an understanding of multiculturalism. Because despite Singapore still having a very dominant race, 73% of people are Chinese, there is a much better understanding of people being mixed, people from different cultures, especially Asian cultures and colonized cultures, more British, because that's who colonized Singapore. When people ask me where I'm from in Singapore, and I say Singapore, they're like, "Oh, okay, that makes sense. That we don't have to question that." When I tell people I'm Danish in Denmark, they're like, "No, but where are you really from?" Like, here I'm Chinese. I'm reduced to my minority status when I'm mixed. For so long, I never identified with my Danish side, with my white side, because that's all I had been reduced to. But in Singapore, it's just like, oh, I'm mixed. And they're like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And then they, I guess, make conversation with me. It depends on the person, right? But like, there's so much of a difference. And I'm, in Singapore, I got a model deal like that. To be fair, the person had been seeing me for a while, but like, because of my features, because I'm Asian and also white and attractive, it was like, oh, you're an easy pick. I got scouted in Denmark and I tried applying twice and they didn't call me back. And it's hard not to feel that that's because of the difference in race relations. I'm beginning to rant, but this is something of a feeling. It's so hard to explain what it is because it's so abstract and it's so just in every layer, you know? So, if you ever hear me just hate on whiteness or Danish culture, and you think, yo, this person's a little bit racist, or he's judging a culture, you know, when he can't fit in it. Something along those lines, right? If you've gotten this far into hearing me fucking rant, if you hear someone push back against the dominant culture, take some time to listen. Because you have no idea the context that they live in, that you don't see. I try to do that. If you don't occupy the minority status that other people do, try to listen. I tried to do that in Singapore. Learning that I'm like white there. I had a conversation with, I think a conversation, but I was trying to understand. I asked family and stuff like that about the race riots, and I asked brown people there about the existence of being, you know, a person of color in Singapore, trying to learn from a privileged standpoint. In Denmark, I am not in a privileged standpoint. So if you don't occupy a minority status or a different minority status than someone who is expressing contempt for the status quo, please listen. You have no idea what they've gone through to make them feel that way. And don't just jump into saying like, oh, that's not real. I will come and burn your house down.